Hello and welcome to the webinar titled Automated Frameworks to Deliver DevOps at Speed and Scale on AWS as part of the AWS webinar series. My name is Sid Nangia. I'm part of the financial services team at AWS, and I'm responsible for the consulting partner ecosystem as well as I lead the solution strategy with our partners. And I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's presentation. In addition to learning about AWS, I'm honored to have Benjamin Wootton from one of our premier partners, Contino, on this webinar. He's a co-founder and CTO of Contino. So let's talk about what you will learn today. So you will understand the core benefits of using AWS. Then we'll move on to how we are driving digital transformation on AWS sector in AWS with our partner solutions. Then I will hand it over to Benjamin, and he will talk about how you can build a flexible, scalable DevOps pipeline for regulated environments. Then we'll move forward on how you can nurture, plan, prove, scale, and improve financial services transformation. And finally, Benjamin will talk about how Contino DevOps solution will empower the financial firm to continually innovate. So at AWS, we have a dedicated financial services team. We talk to financial services customers across the globe. If I say financial services, it covers capital markets, banking, payments, and insurance industries. So I want to talk about the most common challenges across financial services customers. The first important one is the regulatory oversight, and that too since the financial crisis. If you look at the regulations, there's increased amount of regulatory compliance, and it continues to be a significant expense driver across financial services. Just to give you an example, in US, we have CAT, which is Consolidated Audit Trail regulations from FINRA, where all the broker dealers have to comply in this year. Then we have MiFID II in Europe. The second one is all these financial services companies are facing increased competition, especially from new entrants like fintechs and insurtechs. I'm sure you must have heard about the Robinhood over here in US, which is a trading app. So if you look at the traditional players, all these banks and insurance companies, they are looking to change. And in this age where we have millennials, they have more choices as compared to any other time in the history. So it's very, very important for these traditional banks and insurance companies to differentiate themselves. Moving on security, there are so many of security threats in the modern age. I'm sure you must have heard about the cyber criminals and the government-sponsored hackers. It's extremely difficult to be secure with all these threats. Just to give you an example of Equifax hack, which happened last year, and it was a big issue for all the consumers. Moving on, data. So all these financial services companies are sitting on petabytes of data, either for compliance purposes or because of so many connected devices like we have phone, smartwatches, and other IoT devices. All these financial services customers have to think about how they can mine the data, how they can identify the actionable information so that they can use that to increase the business. And moving on, cloud is a new normal. If you think about 2-3 years back, the conversation used to be if customer will move to the cloud, but now it's about when will you move to the cloud. And with the cloud, it has opened up new paradigm for unlimited compute and storage. Just think about it, how financial services, these banks and insurance companies can improve their business with unlimited compute and storage from cloud. Moving on, resources are scarce. As more and more enterprise make the move to the cloud, finding the right people to help you drive this change is important, especially in the light of shrinking budgets and declining revenue. Not sure if you are a Star Trek fan, but a Borg spaceship was in Star Trek, which grew organically with time. Whenever there were new components, it was being added to that Borg spaceship. And this is a financial services Borg ship, and this is the analogy how our traditional financial services companies are. If you look at all these financial services companies, the infrastructure over there has grown organically over the last 30 years. And pretty much it has been built on the monolithic architectures. While talking to the financial services customers, all the application, they have been built using old technologies. And some of those technologies are not even supported today. And if you look at the retail banking and insurance, maybe they have built new digital channels, they have connected to the CRM systems, and they have cool apps, which you can access on your smartwatches. But all of this have been added to the monolithic core systems, which has increased the complexity of the infrastructure over time. And because all this complexity, if you look at any of the banks and or insurance companies, they have a high cost of maintaining the complex infrastructure. It's estimated that around two-thirds of their IT budget just go towards keeping the lights on. As I was talking about the regulatory complexity in my earlier slides, it's so expensive to maintain regulatory requirements into this old legacy infrastructure. And because of the tightly coupled architecture, innovation is so slow. It's very hard for these financial services customers to do anything new. Now we talked about the legacy financial services. Now let's talk about how they can drive the digital transformation. Because of this complex architecture, it's very hard for these financial services institutes to drive digital transformation. If you look at the screen, this is a survey conducted by McKinsey, and financial services is the third least industry to drive digital transformation, only trailed by automotive and consumer goods. And this is because of legacy architecture. They cannot do anything. It's very hard to do any transformation. Now, today's webinar is focused on DevOps, and which is a key for digital transformation. So Benjamin from Contino will talk about how Contino is helping all these legacy financial services to change. In 2006, AWS and really the public cloud was born as a business out of Amazon.com. And since then, it has turned cloud computing into a utility where you can buy computing power as you need by millisecond, and you can scale hundreds and thousands of cores to run risk calculations. Today, we have a global infrastructure with over 90 services, and it's more of a platform. We have services ranging from demand, storage to demand computing, machine learning, security management, IoT, and data and analytics. So we have talked about legacy financial services. Now let's talk about fintechs. Here are some examples, and you will see that AWS is commonly the first choice of fintech startups. These new born in the cloud fintechs don't have any legacy technical debt. They completely started from the fresh, and AWS provided them a platform so that they can scale globally. They can deploy in minutes. For that, they have used DevOps. Again, would like to reiterate that DevOps is the most important for driving digital transformation or for you to be innovative. Let's talk about how financial services is transforming their business with cloud. There are a few steps here. The most important is that financial services are able to eliminate the costly technical debt. They can reduce the overheads. There is no need to buy those expensive servers when starting a new project, and you don't need to sign any multi-year ELAs to buy software. You can allocate resources to new projects much faster, and this links to innovation. You can spin up environments in minutes for new projects, and you can shut down resources if your project does not work. There is no real investment. With that, you have access to innovation on the AWS platform. Instantly you can integrate your application with a lot of new innovation services which are released on AWS. So I'm not sure if you guys were at reInvent, but as of now, we have total 1,400 services built on AWS. Third, if you think about it, it's a great opportunity to find new sources to expand your business. Cloud is a highly scalable infrastructure, and you can build analytics platform. You can scale for huge amount of analysis using the infinite compute on cloud. You can use analytics tools that are provided as part of AWS platform. This really helps identify opportunities and increase the wallet share for all these financial services companies. Our customers who undertake the AWS or cloud journey, they can use the deep analytics and get insights from the data. And what we have seen is that these are the customers who progress and are able to differentiate with us. And I will show you that in some of the customer examples in next few slides. And lastly, if you are on AWS, you pretty much reduce your risk. You have access to the wide range of tools from security perspective, and you are guaranteed on AWS platform that you are using the latest technologies. So I'm sure when you use the cloud, everyone thinks about security, And security has been a major focus for all the organizations when they consider the cloud. And this is especially true for financial services. As all these capital markets institutions, banks, and insurance, they have learned that they have learned about the AWS security, and many of them have determined that AWS scale enables a level of investment on security which exceeds what they have done on their own data centers, and in fact, AWS is more secure. So if you look at the screen, this is AWS shared responsibility model, where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud and it manages the physical security, hypervision layer, and services. Where at the top, it's the customer or a partner who manages the security of their application and network configuration. AWS also provides a wide range of tools to manage security like encryption, data management, and patching of OS. So, well, I've talked about the fintechs, but it's not only startups. If you look at it, we have big organizations in banking, capital markets, and insurance. When Benjamin talks about, he will give you an example of Alliance Insurance and how Contino has helped Alliance in their digital transformation journey by implementing DevOps. And and I'm sure you must have heard the Goldman Sachs story at reInvent. So pretty much we have largest banks, insurance companies, and capital markets running on AWS. Let's talk about how cloud is enabling transformation and innovation in the industry. I will give you certain examples from left to right. Left is more widespread today in financial services, and right is more cutting edge. So let's start with the grid computing. Mostly, a lot of the banks, major banks, the investment firms are using the grid computing to do their risk simulations. If you talk about insurance companies, it's actuarial calculations. They can run these risk simulations whenever they want. They are pretty much constrained on running that on their premises infrastructure. If we look at the agile data analytics, let me give you an example of Aon. Aon is a company in UK. They turned to AWS for the hybrid architecture, and they wanted to use for financial simulation platform. So by using AWS, they were able to recalculate their 5 million of their policies in matter of 10 minutes, versus it used to take them, like it was an overnight process for that. Talking about a core system migration, let me talk about the FINRA. FINRA is again a large regulator in the US. And when I was talking about CAD, so FINRA is the one who kind of defines what all these banks, what regulations all these banks have to adhere to. So FINRA has moved 90% of its data to the AWS. On a daily basis, they are able to inflect 75 billion records on AWS, and they do marketing surveillance using analytics. Now, think about blockchain. We have more blockchain on AWS as compared to any other cloud, including customers like Nasdaq, BigChain, and Coinbase as an example there. So if we talk about cutting edge technologies, think about AI and machine learning. I would like to give you certain examples on this slide. In terms of AI and ML, moving again from left to right, there are a number of use cases here specifically for financial services. So one of our customers is using AWS machine learning to help assist and detect financial crime. I don't know if you have heard, at reInvent about our new services released for AI and ML. We have got services like Transcribe and Comprehend, which enables our customers to process and gain insights from vast amount of documents. And then you have a recommendation engine, where we can detect customers' patterns of behavior and apply machine learning algorithms to detect the behavior. And just to give you an example of recommendation engine, it will be our customers are doing some POCs specifically in the wealth management space, where they will look at the customer's age, how much money he has got, and then based on that they can recommend him some wealth management products. So if we talk about the trading systems, we can use Transcribe to do the sentiment analysis and do the market analysis. And lastly, it's not about customer experience, it's all about customer experience. Whatever our financial services companies do, they do it for the customers. Our customers want that they should be able to interact at any given time, right? And for which we have Lex and Poly services. and I'm sure every one of you know about Alexa. So they can use these services to integrate with Alexa, and they can also build chatbots. So if you look at all the use cases which I talked in my earlier slides, our customers want to be innovative, and for that, we have to provide them some ready solutions which can help in their digital transformation journey. We are working very closely with our premier partners like Contino, and they are building customer-ready solutions. And Contino has been engaged with large financial services customers and helping them in their DevOps journey. With that, I would like to hand it over to Benjamin Wootton, CTO of Contino, to talk about DevOps solution for which they have, transforming a large financial services organization. So over to you, Benjamin, and thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah, thanks very much, Sid. My name's Benjamin Wootton. I'm a co-founder and CTO at Contino. We are a AWS Premier Consulting partner who focus on helping large regulated organizations move to DevOps in the cloud operating models. As well as being a Premier Consulting partner, we have a DevOps and financial services competency based on our work with large enterprise organizations around the world. So essentially what we do is we kind of partner strategically with our enterprise clients to help them really accelerate time to value and innovation and agility. And we find that the cloud is kind of the key platform which enables them to do this. The kind of goals they're looking to achieve is increased speed and efficiency and agility and quality, but doing that in a controlled and compliant way, so not introducing any risk into their deliveries. Our kind of enterprise clients are looking to modernize and evolve their culture to be more of a innovation and engineering culture, to make technology a kind of core competency, whereas historically it might have been a cost base. And as I mentioned, we're looking to do that in a controlled, compliant and secure way. So there's definite demand to go faster, but we obviously want to do that without introducing reputational or security risk. And kind of some of the other challenges we see amongst our kind of regulated and financial services customers are listed here. There's a lot of legacy from an organizational perspective, so kind of heavily siloed, lots of processes, a lot of bureaucracy which is built up, which means that it takes an awful lot of time to get anything new or bring new propositions to market. We have some of the technical challenges which Sid touched on, so that kind of big ball of mud of monolithic legacy systems which are very challenging to change, highly interconnected and fragile. And then from a risk perspective, obviously customers are very aware of cybercrime and increasing regulatory change. And all of this makes it very hard for companies to move to this innovation culture and deliver new technology quickly and new applications quickly. What we find is, we are in a time of disruption, and banks and financial services organizations, they have to kind of overcome this challenge if they are to remain relevant. In the past, people have been talking about disruption, and we talked a lot about Blockbuster and Uber and brands like that. And then over the last few years, kind of here in the UK, we're talking about brands such as Monzo, TransferWise, and Nutmeg. And a couple of years ago, they had kind of a lot of column inches, but nowadays, 2018, they're obviously kind of taking an increasing share of markets which incumbents really care about. And what's interesting is a lot of these brands are out there publicly talking about how they're using AWS and how they're using cloud native architecture in order to deliver quickly and innovate against their competition. So kind of our proposition to our customers and the challenge which they need to overcome is kind of radical modernization of how they work. And this spans everything. So, you need to evolve your architecture from big, risky, monolithic, interconnected to something which can be easily changed in a risk-free manner. The whole operating model, which is, generally kind of slow and process-based and means that we infrequently deliver change, it has to be modernized to something faster and more akin to continuous delivery. The old world is kind of full of bottlenecks and dependencies, where we have dependencies on central infrastructure teams or vendors to do work for us. We have to change to something much leaner. And we also talk about how the priorities have to change. So, it's not about necessarily keeping the cost down and making sure that nothing ever breaks. Nowadays, we have to get to market faster. We have to innovate more. So the whole kind of organizational priorities are being turned on their head a little bit. And what we believe is that, kind of DevOps and continuous delivery and some of the architectural practices like microservices and cloud native architecture are the kind of tools and ingredients which enterprises need to adopt today in order to overcome these challenges. Now, our proposition to these enterprises is, we will help you adopt these modern ways of working and modern kind of platforms such as AWS. So from a ways of working perspective, changing your organizational structure, changing your delivery processes in a way which allows you to move quickly, but also in a controlled, compliant and secure way. And then from a technology perspective, again, we want to adopt the cloud, we want to adopt cloud native services, we want to adopt modern practices such as microservices and continuous delivery, but again, in a way which takes account of your kind of regulatory controls, compliance environment, and the fact that for you it is a transformation from a traditional way of working and doing things. It's a change journey which companies must go on. And lots of companies are trying this. Digital transformation has been talked about for a number of years, but kind of statistics are starting to come through about the failure rate of those digital transformation programs where they're not delivering on the anticipated value. So what we've seen as a professional services firm working with some of the kind of leading financial services organizations is how everyone's really faced with the same challenges from people, process, technology perspective, and they're looking to get to the same place, which is rapid delivery in a controlled, compliant manner. And what that has allowed us to do is develop some repeatable frameworks, which we have deployed now many times with some of the largest kind of banks and insurance companies around the world, which is what we really wanted to talk about today. And what we're going to touch on is kind of two parts of that puzzle. The first is a kind of automation framework, which we have developed for helping companies move to DevOps on AWS, which includes your kind of landing zones and continuous delivery pipelines and infrastructure as code and capabilities such as that. And momentum, which is our people and process change framework, because what we find is the power of the cloud is amplified as you move to a DevOps operating model against that. So what we're going to do now is spend kind of 10 minutes talking through these kind of offerings and examples of where we've deployed them. So first, Convoy. So what we were finding is we were being taken into lots of financial services organizations who were looking to get started on AWS. And they all have the same kind of questions and challenges around environment management and infrastructure as code. And we want to do it in a secure and compliant way. And we want to set up accounts, etc. And we want a CI, continuous delivery pipeline. So based on all of those projects, what we've done is built a quick start framework called Convoy, where we can walk into a new customer, rapidly deploy those landing zones, and really accelerate the time to value for a customer who wants to deploy software within AWS. Convoy gives us two kind of capabilities, and the aim was that within 10 minutes and one command, we'll deliver these capabilities. The first is the kind of segregated environments for dev, test, and prod, and they would, of course, be fully automated, configuration managed, infrastructure as code for the entire stack. And the idea should be that you can click a button, spin up a new environment on demand, which reduces bottlenecks for dev or testing and ensures that all of the environments are in line, so no kind of inconsistencies between environments due to the automation. And they would be configured for operational and security best practices. And the second capability, which we stand up as part of Convoy, is this automated continuous delivery pipeline. So we have two options here where we will stand up a kind of open source based CI/CD pipeline based on GitLab, Jenkins, Nexus, and tools like that. But then more frequently, we also have a AWS based pipeline with code deploy, code commit, code pipeline, where companies don't want to manage that development tooling stack. And this whole pipeline is oriented around containerized microservice deployments. So historically, we've been based around ECS as a target endpoint, which is a EC2 container service, and we're just modernizing this now to EKS, the Kubernetes service. And we have a lot of features in this around incorporating compliance and governance and controls and DevSecOps into those pipelines. So we're going to have a demo of this in a moment, but briefly the way it works is the developer, the DevOps engineer, clones Convoy, There's minimal configuration, so out of the box you just have to specify a few AWS account IDs. Then there's one command, we just say Convoy run. That goes and builds a bunch of images using the HashiCorp suite of tools. So using Ansible and Packer to build images, such as web servers and middleware and application services. We then go into a Terraform phase where we actually go and stand up the networks and the servers and the security groups and the VPCs based on the configuration of the environments. And then what we can do is kind of deploy into these containerized endpoints. So by default, you have a EC2 container service within DevStage and Prod, and we can orchestrate applications through those environments. We also deploy GitLab, and all of that configuration is pushed into GitLab. So if you want to modify infrastructure, such as changing a server, or modify a version of a library, or modify a piece of code, that whole flow flows through source control and through your CI process. So your whole stack from the data center upwards is defined using infrastructure as code. Some of the key principles we were aiming for in the design of this. So again, the full stack should be infrastructure as code. So we have full traceability and audit as to how those environments are built, and we can create cookie cutter environments. It's designed to be very pluggable. So if you want to switch in components for different open source tools, or switching AWS services, that should be fine, all pluggable and swappable. We aimed for no lock-in, so the idea is it's a thin wrapper and you can remove it quite easily. So unlike some kind of heavyweight cloud orchestration tools, we didn't want any dependency on Convoy. The whole thing is built around modern infrastructure and containers, so container orchestration, all of the servers and services and application deployments are containerized, and security is absolutely key in this. It's all has kind of AWS well-architected best practices built in to ensure that data is secure and environments are locked down appropriately. I jump into a demo of this. It takes 5 minutes or so, but it should be worth it just to bring the framework to life. So when we start here in a sec, the first thing we see is the configuration file. So the developer has come along, they've cloned from GitHub and pulled up that configuration file. I'll have a video to catch up. And by default, you have very opinionated defaults. So we're going to say we have 4 environments, these IP address blocks. We'll have a kind of medium instances. We're going to have 4 instances in each environment, it's a CentOS build, etc. And the only thing we have to specify is your AWS account IDs. And you can do things like put an account specifically for production, as a lot of people do. They'll put different accounts and different VPCs in different accounts. And then at the bottom there, we're specifying the IP address ranges for each account and each environment. And here we are specifying which images go into each environment. So you can see there we ask for a Bastion host in the tools environment. We put Jenkins, Apache, ELK, Prometheus, a bunch of kind of monitoring tools and CI tools. And then you can also put images in your application environment, so certain microservices and things like that. So having specified that minimum configuration, the next thing we do is that one command. I used to be called Continuum, that's Convoy. And the first thing we see happen here is go and build a bunch of images. So using Packer by HashiCorp, you'll see we're building Jira and SonarQube and Confluent and GitLab and Apache servers and Bastion hosts and all of that sort of stuff. And we're building all of that using Ansible. So the whole thing is fully defined infrastructure as code. So if we skip on a little bit, you can see here, we're actually, we've completed that phase where we've built the images, and a lot of the kind of intelligence in Convoy is around versioning of AMIs. So what we're doing here is publishing a set of AMIs onto S3 for each of the different environments. And this means that we get very consistent environments and solid versioning and stuff like that. So moving on a little bit, now we're in the Terraform phase of the project. And what we're doing here is standing up all of the components within AWS. So you can see the security groups and the load balancers and the servers and the NAT gateways and the Route 53 DNS entries and stuff like that. And this is very fast because we go away and we build all of those environments kind of in parallel, and they're all complete cookie cutters of one another. So here we flip to the AWS console and we do a refresh, and we can see dev, tools, production, and staging environments are all coming to life. And the interesting thing here is, nobody's had to click into the AWS GUI. You wouldn't even have to issue a kind of AWS credentials. The whole thing has been developed using infrastructure as code techniques, so the best kind of DevOps best practices. And here we're just kind of scanning around to look at the environment which has been built, so the security groups and the key pairs for encrypted data at rest and stuff like that. And here we browse around, just kind of confirming that's all worked. We've got different VPCs, different subnets, so all of those environments are locked down, they're in different accounts, etc., etc. So the second capability we talked about as part of Convoy is this kind of CI/CD pipeline, which incorporates controls and containerized microservice capabilities. So we take a minute to spin up, but you can see there at CI tool address in a minute, Jenkins should pop up. And by default, we're using tools like GitLab and SonarQube and Jira and Confluence and Prometheus. So generally kind of open source tools. So we can see there is Jenkins, there is GitLab, SonarQube, which is kind of a code quality tool, Jira for bug tracking. So these are just like the common tools which kind of enterprises are deploying as part of their software development lifecycle. Now, if we try and hit the application, there's nothing running in dev stage and prod. That's why we have that 503. So what we're going to do now, just to demonstrate, is we have an example microservice-based application which we're about to deploy. It's called, so we're going to push these pipelines in. And the application, it's called Tribeca. It's a Bitcoin trading application, which we use as part of our demonstrations. So the first thing we do here is we push the deployment pipelines into Jenkins. So again, this is a fully infrastructure as code, no clicking around in Jenkins. We've just deployed them from Jenkins templates. And then here, what we do is we pull up a build pipeline view. And what this does is show how this application progresses from dev to stage to prod. And again, note at this point, there's been no clicking around within AWS. There's been no clicking around in Jenkins. There's been very minimal configuration. But what we've got is these secure AWS environments. We have a CI/CD pipeline, and we have this kind of capability for containerized deployments. So what we're seeing here is, it's the first build of the application, and that is creating a bunch of Docker containers and putting them in the AWS Docker container service. And then in a second, we'll see that we move to the development deploy. And here we can see that those containers are being deployed. And if I go in here and hit refresh in a minute, the development environment comes to life. The application's been deployed. And if you can see those numbers start moving. So what we've deployed there is a fairly complex microservice-based application. And again, no clicking around in GUIs, it's all infrastructure as code, so fully kind of DevOps optimized, all based on Ansible, Terraform, and AWS automation. So the demo will finish in a second, hopefully with a successful production deployment. And then we have a number of kind of other scenarios where I can modify this application and kind of push through individual microservices, etc., etc. So at the end of the demo, there's a lot more to it, and happy to kind of run through that offline with other people. But hopefully the kind of power of that comes across, that it's fully infrastructure as code, very, very high degrees of automation. And what we've seen is that companies that try to get to that level of automation themselves, it can take many years doing that kind of non-differentiating activities. What we have with Convoy is a very opinionated and rapid way to quickly get to value as you go on your AWS adoption journey. The second piece of intellectual property which we deploy with our clients, which I wanted to talk about today, is called Momentum. And this is the kind of people and process framework we have for helping companies adopt DevOps practices. And that includes the kind of organizational changes in terms of the different groups, moving to cross-functional teams, and evolving processes to be leaner and controlled and more akin to continuous delivery. So, the challenge we're looking to solve with Momentum is, companies, as I mentioned, they're looking to move to DevOps as part of their digital transformation ambitions, but doing that in a controlled and compliant and secure way. And everyone starts with the same questions, how do we do it here, considering our unique challenges and the unique context of our business? How do you do this at scale with lots of engineers and applications? How do you kind of tie this back to business case and metric-based improvement? How and where do you do it in your application portfolio and within your maybe global organization? And what should your DevOps operating model look like? And these are the areas where we've tried to come up with a really opinionated approach to regulated financial services customers. And again, I think similar to Convoy, we wanted this to be quite kind of lightweight. It's very all about kind of proving DevOps and then scaling it. So not trying to solve for every particular eventuality. And we have a concept of a lighthouse project where, let's just adopt DevOps, let's prove it, let's prove the benefits, let's prove it works technically, and then we'll consider how to scale it to the organization. So very pragmatic. I'd also call out the aim is to be very measurable and ROI driven. So, you can't improve what you can't measure. So what we want to do is, we have a very kind of powerful framework for measuring a DevOps capability, measuring how that improves over time and associating that back to a return on investment. And that's kind of fundamental to the framework. Here's a roadmap of Momentum. So we'll start and we'll have a work stream around nurturing kind of DevOps in the cloud. So working with the different stakeholders, educating, aligning on the problem. We'll then move to a plan it phase where we have a structured assessment and benchmarking exercise, and we'll develop a DevOps strategy together with the customer, DevOps in the cloud strategy, and develop a high-level business case. We then execute those lighthouse projects, which I talked about, which is typically a 12-week deliverable in the cloud to prove DevOps in the cloud within your environment. And then after that, which I think was a key realization for us, is scale it after you've proven it on a real-world project. So only at that point, after you've proven it, get deep into your target operating model and establishing center of excellence and establishing academies and things like that. And then move into a kind of metric-driven continuous improvement phase. And we've executed this with a number of organizations now quite successfully who have been looking to this kind of rapid delivery model, but in a controlled, compliant way. And one of those examples, our referenceable public example, is with Allianz, who are one of the world's leading and largest insurers. And they wanted to refresh a market which is valued at $300 million globally. And their challenge was really one around time to market, that existing delivery models would take 18 months to 2 years to stand up this new capability. And we looked at that with a client and we said, look, if you move to a DevOps in the cloud operating model, so if you use AWS, if you use cloud native services, if you move cross-functional teams, you can deliver this capability in a much shorter span of time. So after an initial kind of lightweight strategy phase, what we proposed was, let's initiate that DevOps Lighthouse project consisting of Contino experts who have been there and done this together with your own internal staff to build capability. Let's build a new platform from scratch in AWS. And then let's deliver a real-world application which generates revenue using a small co-located cross-functional team. They're doing continuous delivery. We're doing end-to-end environments, and we're using some of the assets from Convoy in terms of the automation assets. And this has been a kind of highly successful project and transformative project for Allianz with us. The CIO very kindly went on record with a public piece, which we can probably share the link after a webinar, talking about these new capabilities, how we can stand up a new region within 3 hours. We can push a new chain from idea to implementation in 30 minutes, or we can stand up a completely new microservice within an hour. So what we're really doing there is going from business idea to revenue generating opportunities within months and not years. It's already delivered kind of higher revenues and also developed a scalable and repeatable operating model as a result of that initial lighthouse project. We'll wrap up there and we'll move into the Q&A. But just to kind of replay quickly what we talked about there, solving this challenge of digital transformation with financial services organizations many, many times, and develop two reusable and repeatable frameworks as part of that. The first is Convoy, which is the kind of automation side of the equivalent. Standing up secure infrastructure as code environments in AWS with an associated continuous delivery pipeline. And the second is Momentum, which is the process half of the DevOps transformation journey for regulated financial services clients. And what we find is when those two come together, it's an incredibly powerful combination where you're not only enabling your organization to deliver faster and innovate better, you're also modernizing your platform and moving to a very kind of cloud native platform to build on. And the results there are kind of incredibly impressive, and the kind of results which your incumbent financial services organizations really need to achieve to combat some of the disruption which we talked about earlier. So I'll wrap up there and we can move into Q&A.
Thank you, Benjamin. I have got probably 15-20 questions, and I'm just gonna prioritizing it. I think this is pretty interesting, and it's for you, Benjamin. The question is that you work with large financial services companies on DevOps engagement. I think if you talk about DevOps, it's also to change the cultural part of any organization. How you take care of the cultural issue when you implement this solution? Can you give certain examples?
Yeah, I think when we started this, we found that that kind of culture was what people were really asking us for. They wanted a kind of innovation culture like Amazon. They were like, we're an insurance company, how do we innovate like Amazon? And we kind of struggled with that question for a while, but then we realized that the culture was kind of the end game, and it was a prize for these organizations. To actually get to that culture, you have to make real concrete changes to how you work. And simple things like co-location, simple things like breaking up organizational structures so people are all aligned around one business goal, moving to a world where teams can provision their own infrastructure using automation. That's opening up a new capability which is aligned with DevOps goals. So I think when you do those people changes, when you do those process changes, when you kind of modernize a platform so you can deliver in a DevOps manner akin to Amazon, then you have all of the ingredients for a DevOps culture. So what we found is, you have to kind of, step one is getting out of the way of your own engineers, I guess, by modernizing that stuff. But then I think the model for Contino is that what we found is, you really have to show an organization what a DevOps operating model and culture looks like and the benefits, which is why we settled on that concept of a lighthouse project, which is, let's deliver a project in a DevOps manner. So cross-functional teams, continuous delivery, infrastructure automation in the cloud, and really show what it can be. And then when you've done that, you've actually seeded it in the organization. And then we have a kind of model where we divide and split and deliver more and more projects in a DevOps manner, and then introduce kind of lighter touch initiatives like kind of academies and center of excellence, et cetera, and scale it in that way. So yeah, for us, that's kind of how we go about it. And we really do feel that it's a very large legacy and regulated organizations we have move the needle in large areas of those organizations towards that DevOps culture people are looking for.
Thank you, Benjamin. Again, another question is on your solution, Convoy. So the question is that, will I get logged into the certain deals, or I have to be reliant on Contino's consultants going forward? Can you answer that, please?
So I think two pieces to this. So we did design it to be opinionated but pluggable. So, we made choices based on industry leading tools. But the idea is it's very easy to switch those out. So yeah, that's actually core to the platform. I think our whole model is around capability building. So, we don't necessarily say, let us come in and configure AWS and build your pipelines for you. We're all about let's co-deliver projects and build capability within your own workforce, because everyone struggles to access the DevOps or cloud talent, and we find that is a demand in the market. So absolutely, I think if any dependency was being built on us, that would be a failing. The ambition is to build capability and skills within the organization.
Okay, the other question is about AWS. They're asking that you mentioned about the partner solution. So is this the only solution as part of the solution catalog? So I'm going to take that question. To answer that, at AWS, we are working with our strategic consulting partners, like Contino is one of them, but we also have other solutions which we have built with our partners to help in our customers' digital transformation journey. Talking about that, we have worked with other partners to build a solution on chatbots, how it can get integrated with Facebook. We are working with other technology partners like Intel, Saffron on a solution on cognitive. And again, talking about financial services, we have another solution on the predictive analytics from FICO. So this is about digital transformation, but apart from digital transformation, we also have partner-ready solutions in the space of GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance. So we have 8 solutions over there, but as part of this, maybe I will add a link to the presentation where you will have a link to all the solutions. But our objective is that, in 2018 and 2019, we'll be expanding all these partner solutions as part of our ecosystem. There is one more question which has come, which is, other than the secure standard configuration, what all other security controls were considered? I think probably you can answer that, Benjamin.
So what we often have to do, so there's certain kind of regulatory controls which are in common with many people. So in Europe, for instance, we've been doing a lot of work on MiFID, and part of those are kind of infrastructure related. So, we can kind of help accelerate some of those controls. An example might be clock synchronization as part of MiFID, or segregation of duty as part of SOX compliance. And those are common to everybody. But then what you also find is, typical financial services organization has their own controls and compliance demands. So what you'd have to do is work with them to codify some of those and move to more of a continuous compliance model. And that obviously kind of takes time and effort to codify those rules. But once you have them, you can be, for instance, continually scanning your environment to ensure that you remain secure. And this is a great kind of message to take back to auditors and InfoSec and compliance to say, look, we've moved away from infrequent manual security reviews, which just kind of slow everything down, to a model of continuous compliance where it's baked into application and infrastructure changes. So yeah, they're the 2 pieces. There's the controls which are common to everybody, and then the controls which are specific to the organization. And I think both of those can be accelerated on AWS with the right automation approaches.
Thank you. There's another question. They asked that, do you have any sample Terraform-based ECS deployment scripts that we can look at it? I think it's from one of the,
Yeah, we do. We would be happy to share one of those. So we can either share it directly if they have the person's contact details, or I will put a link into a presentation to a GitHub repo. It's actually very simple to automate ECS using Terraform. We're relatively surprised how well that works.
Okay, great. There's another question on your solution, Momentum. It sounds good, but how do you actually go about getting stakeholder buy-in at the beginning of a project? And
so the first phase of it was that nurture phase, and that we do find that is really important, which is all around engaging people around the business and technology. So early engagement of security and the business and product people and infrastructure and application teams, and getting them into the same room and kind of getting them aligned on the current state and the strategy. What we try to orchestrate the whole cloud journey around is around a business problem. So instead of saying, we're going to do some engineering in front of AWS, we try to find a real workload and say, our responsibility is to deliver this workload as rapidly as possible. And so like a new application would be an example, deliver it as rapidly as possible within a secure, controlled and compliant way, and then use that to drive out the requirement. And we find that's a much more successful way rather than everybody kind of throwing their concerns into a ring, coming up with a huge technology project. It can be a great way to kind of break down barriers between the different stakeholders and get everybody aligned.
Thank you. I think let's take the last question. And again, there's a question on your momentum. Question is that, are there any metrics that you track, and how do you actually measure and prove the improvements?
So yeah, one of our kind of core realizations about DevOps is the idea was a little bit kind of very open, a little bit woolly, kind of what it was, what it means. So we were very keen on creating a science around DevOps, and we started by making a kind of database of all of the considerations. So, cross-functional teams, continuous delivery, automation for building environment, test automation, all of those things. And we got to a database of 220 considerations. And what we do is we will go out and baseline and measure all of those capabilities using discovery, or we have some kind of self-service surveys which we deploy to capture those metrics. And then as the organization builds new capabilities, what we'll do is kind of plug those into a model and show how the different capabilities are being built and maturity is uplifting over the life of the engagement. And then what we do is we take all of those metrics and plug them into a business case framework to kind of explain where savings are being accrued, where additional time to value is being accrued in terms of pound and pence. And those two are continually linked. So if I form a new capability, such as, improve the reliability of deployment, then I can instantly see what is the return on investment of that new capability. And we find it's a very powerful IT transformation tool for keeping momentum of that transformation.
No, great. Thank you, Benjamin. So I think with this, we would like to wrap up this webinar. Thank you for all attending today's webinar, and we look forward to supporting you in current and future projects. And again, thank you from AWS team as well as from a Contino team. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.